Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely.
Today we're tackling something, well, a little tricky.
Yeah.
Gaslighting.
Ooh, interesting.
And you guys sent in a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Articles, research, even a guide from Reddit.
Wow, it's everywhere these days.
It really is. Seems like everyone's talking about gaslighting, but what does it actually mean?
Right.
You know, beyond just like someone being a jerk.
Well, it's interesting because the term itself comes from that old Ingrid Bergman movie, Gaslight.
Oh, right.
Where the husband is manipulating the environment, dimming the gaslights, pretending nothing's changed to make his wife think she's going insane.
So that's where the term comes from. But how does that translate to real life? Like, it can't be just any disagreement or someone being, you know, rude, right?
Right, exactly. Gaslighting goes beyond a simple disagreement.
Yeah.
It's this deliberate pattern of manipulation where someone tries to make you doubt your own reality, your memories, even your sanity. And it can happen in any kind of relationship.
So partners, friends.
Partners, friends, family, even in the workplace.
So it's not just the content of what's being said, but the intent behind it.
Exactly.
Like, if my boss takes credit for my idea in a meeting, is that automatically gaslighting?
Not necessarily. Could just be a simple oversight. A misunderstanding. Gaslighting is really about this persistent pattern of denying your reality. Making you question your own perceptions. And ultimately gaining control over you.
That makes sense. So let's say my boss did take credit for my idea. And then later when I brought it up, they denied it ever happened. And this happened again. And again. That's starting to sound a lot more like gaslighting.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting.
The
gaslighter might not even be fully conscious of what they're doing.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes it's a learned behavior, like a way of deflecting responsibility or maybe maintaining a sense of superiority. Other times it can be tied to some deeper psychological issues like narcissism.
So someone could be gaslighting me without even realizing it.
Potentially,
Okay, that's a little unsettling. But let's say I am in a situation where I feel like someone's messing with my head. How do I know for sure it's gaslighting? And not just like normal relationship stuff?
That's where understanding kind of the psychology of gaslighting comes in. One of the core reasons it works is because it taps into this deep-seated need for validation, especially from people we trust and admire.
Okay, so we all want to feel seen and heard, especially by the people closest to us. What does that have to do with gaslighting?
Well, when someone we depend on, someone we hold in high regard, repeatedly tells us that we're wrong, we start questioning ourselves. We might think, maybe I am misremembering things. Maybe I am being too sensitive. And that self-doubt, that's exactly what the gaslighter is aiming for.
So it's not just about them making us feel bad. It's about making us doubt our own perception to the point where we rely on their version of reality.
Exactly. And over time, that can lead to this state of, learned helplessness. Where you start to feel like you have no control over your own life, your own thoughts and feelings.
That's scary. So let's say I'm starting to recognize some of these patterns in my own relationship. What are some specific red flags, like things that the gaslighter might say that would confirm my suspicion?
Well, the source material actually highlights some really common phrases that gaslighters use. And it's interesting how often we might even say these things ourselves without realizing the potential harm.
Like what? Give me some examples.
So think about phrases like, you're overreacting. You're imagining things, I never said that, or even you're too sensitive. And notice how these phrases, they shift the blame onto you, making you question your emotional response rather than addressing the issue at hand.
Wow, you're right. I've definitely heard those phrases before. And probably even said them a few times myself. But in the context of gaslighting, they take on a whole new meaning. It's not just about disagreeing. It's about invalidating the other person's feelings and experiences.
And that's one of the most insidious aspects of gaslighting. It can be incredibly subtle. Often it starts with like these seemingly innocuous comments, behaviors that gradually chip away at your confidence and your sense of self.
So how do you distinguish between someone who's just being thoughtless or having a bad day versus someone who's intentionally trying to manipulate you?
That's where paying attention to the patterns and the overall dynamic of the relationship is crucial.
Okay.
So is this like a one-time occurrence or is it a recurring theme? Do you consistently feel, confused or belittled or on edge around this person?
Yeah.
Does the conversation always seem to circle back to you being the problem?
That's really helpful. So it's not just about specific words or actions,
Right.
but the overall feeling you get in the relationship.
Exactly.
If something feels off, it probably is.
Exactly. Trust your gut.
Yeah.
If you consistently feel like you're walking on eggshells,
Mm-hmm.
second-guessing yourself, or questioning your sanity, that's a huge red flag.
Okay, let's say I'm starting to recognize some of these red flags in my own life.
Right.
What should I do?
Right.
Where do I even begin to address this?
Well, the good news is you've already taken the first step, which is awareness.
Okay.
Recognizing the signs of gaslighting, that is crucial to breaking free from its grip.
So what comes next? Let's dive into some concrete strategies for dealing with gaslighting, whether it's happening at work, in a romantic relationship, or even with family and friends.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dive into gaslighting.
It's amazing how once you start learning about something like gaslighting, you start seeing it everywhere.
It really does, doesn't it? Like, how much do we just accept or brush off as, normal relationship quirks? But the thing is, even if the gaslighting isn't intentional, the impact can still be pretty damaging.
Right. So let's get into some practical strategies, some ways to actually deal with gaslighting when we see it happening. You mentioned awareness earlier. What else can we do?
Well, one of the most powerful tools you have is setting boundaries.
Okay.
And this means clearly defining what behaviors you will and will not tolerate and communicating those boundaries to the gaslighter.
So if someone keeps telling me I'm overreacting, I could say something like, I feel disrespected when you dismiss my feelings. I'm asking you to listen and acknowledge my perspective.
Exactly. It's about owning your experience and refusing to be drawn into their game of invalidation.
Right.
You're basically saying, I won't participate in this conversation if you're going to twist my words or deny my reality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what if the gaslighter just keeps pushing back? Like, what if they deny saying those things or they try to turn it around on me?
Well, that's where documentation comes in.
Okay.
One of the sources suggested keeping a journal or a log of these interactions, noting the date, the time, the specific phrases or behaviors that felt, gaslighting.
That sounds like a good way to, stay grounded in my own reality, especially if the gaslighter is trying to make me question my memory or my perception of what happened.
Exactly. Having a written record can help you to see the patterns more clearly.
Yeah.
And remind yourself that you're not imagining things. And it can also be helpful if you decide to, seek support from a therapist or a counselor.
Speaking of support, one of the things that really resonated with me in the source material was the importance of surrounding yourself with people you trust.
That's absolutely crucial. Gaslighting can be so isolating.
Yeah.
It makes you question your own judgment. You doubt the validity of your experiences.
Right.
Having a support system, people who believe you, validate your feelings, offer a different perspective, can really be a lifeline.
So if I'm feeling confused or unsure about a situation, talking to a trusted friend or family member can help me, get clarity and reassurance.
Exactly. They can help you see things more objectively, remind you of your strengths, and offer encouragement when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Now, the source material also talks about different ways gaslighting can show up in different settings.
Right.
So let's dive into some specific examples, starting with the workplace. We touched on this earlier, but it feels like a whole other beast compared to, say, gaslighting in a romantic relationship.
Well, what's unique about workplace gaslighting is the power dynamic.
Right.
You have someone in a position of authority, a boss, a supervisor, maybe a senior colleague, who is using their influence to undermine your confidence, take credit for your work, or even sabotage your career.
And the stakes just feel so much higher.
Yeah.
Your livelihood is on the line.
Right.
So it's not as easy to just walk away from the situation.
Exactly. And because workplace gaslighting can be so subtle, it can be difficult to prove or even articulate what's happening. You might feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah.
Especially if the gaslighter is skilled at manipulating others and creating this false narrative.
So what can you do if you find yourself in this situation? We talked about documentation, but are there other strategies that might be helpful?
Well, one of the sources suggests finding allies within the organization.
Okay.
This could be a trusted colleague, a mentor, or even an HR representative. Having someone who understands what you're going through and can offer support and guidance can make a huge difference.
That makes sense. It's like having a witness to back you up.
Right.
Especially if the gaslighter is trying to, spread rumors or discredit you behind your back.
Right. And in some cases, if the gaslighting is severe and persistent, you might need to consider reporting it to HR or even seeking legal counsel.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse. And you have the right to protect yourself.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears and talk about gaslighting in romantic relationships.
Okay, this one feels particularly complex because romantic relationships are supposed to be based on, trusts and intimacy.
Right.
So how do you even begin to process the idea that someone you love could be intentionally manipulating you?
It's incredibly painful to acknowledge that someone you care about might be capable of that kind of betrayal.
Yeah.
And often the gaslighter will exploit those very feelings of love and loyalty to further their own agenda.
One of the sources described it as this kind of like mind game.
Yeah.
Where the gaslighter creates a world in which their version of reality is the only one that matters.
Exactly. They might deny your memories, twist your words,
yeah,
or accuse you of being, crazy, all the while professing their love and concern. It can be incredibly disorienting and emotionally draining.
So how do you start to break free from that kind of manipulation? It feels like the stakes are even higher in a romantic relationship because you're more emotionally invested.
Well, one of the key strategies the sources emphasize is maintaining your own sense of self.
Okay.
And this means staying connected to your own values, your beliefs, your experiences, even when the gaslighter is trying to undermine them.
So it's about holding on to your own internal compass, even when the world around you feels like it's spinning.
Exactly. It's about trusting your own judgment.
Right.
Even when the gaslighter is trying to convince you that you're wrong, crazy, or incapable.
One of the sources mentioned the importance of journaling as a way to kind of stay grounded in your own reality. How does that work?
Well, writing down your thoughts and feelings can be such a powerful tool for processing what's happening and identifying kind of the patterns in the gaslighter's behavior. You can also use your journal to record specific instances of gaslighting.
Okay.
Including, dates, times, exact phrases used.
So if my partner denies saying something hurtful or tries to rewrite history, I can refer back to my journal and say, actually, this is what you said, and this is how it made me feel.
Exactly. It's about having that concrete evidence to counter their manipulations.
Right.
And remind yourself that you're not losing your mind.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like building a case file for your own sanity.
Exactly.
And remember, the goal isn't necessarily to win an argument or convince the gaslighter that they're wrong.
Right.
It's about protecting yourself and preserving your own sense of reality.
Right, exactly.
One of the things that struck me in the source material was the idea that sometimes walking away from a gaslighting relationship, whether it's romantic, professional, or even with family, can be the most empowering thing you can do.
That's a really powerful point. It's not about giving up or admitting defeat.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing your own worth.
Right.
And refusing to tolerate being treated with disrespect and manipulation.
So sometimes the healthiest choice is to just create distance.
Yeah.
And focus on rebuilding your own life, your own sense of self, and your own happiness.
Exactly. You deserve to be in relationships where you feel safe, respected, and valued for who you are.
And sometimes that means choosing yourself, even if it's difficult.
Now, speaking of choosing yourself, there's this whole other layer to gaslighting that we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
And it's one that can be particularly insidious, gaslighting in medical settings.
That's something I'm really curious to unpack. When you're dealing with health issues, you're already in a vulnerable position.
Right.
You're looking to these medical professionals for guidance and support.
Right.
So it's especially disturbing to think about gaslighting happening in that context.
Absolutely. And the source material highlights some pretty chilling examples of how this can manifest.
Like what?
So you might have a doctor who dismisses your symptoms.
Yeah.
Tells you it's all in your head.
Right.
Or attributes, serious conditions to stress or anxiety without proper investigation.
And because medical gaslighting often preys on those kind of pre-existing power imbalances and societal biases, it can be particularly difficult to recognize and challenge.
Right. You might think, well, they're the doctor. They must know what they're talking about, even if something feels deeply wrong or off about the interaction.
So how do you navigate that tricky situation? What steps can you take to protect yourself and advocate for your own health and well-being?
Well, the source material offers some really valuable advice for dealing with medical gaslighting.
Okay.
One of the key strategies is to come prepared to your appointments.
Okay.
So research your symptoms, potential conditions, make a list of questions you want to ask, and consider bringing a trusted friend or family member for support.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're informed and you have someone there to advocate for you,
right,
you're less likely to be swayed by dismissive or gaslighting behavior.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
Okay.
If you don't understand something, or if the doctor's explanation just doesn't feel right.
So it's okay to push back respectfully and say, like, I'm not sure I understand what you mean, or can you explain that in a different way?
Absolutely. It's your health.
Right.
And you have the right to be fully informed and involved in your own care.
The source material also emphasizes the importance of seeking a second opinion if you have any lingering doubts or concerns.
That's such a crucial point. It's not about disrespecting your doctor.
Right.
It's about advocating for your own well-being. Sometimes a fresh perspective from another healthcare professional can make all the difference in getting the diagnosis and treatment you need.
And if you're still feeling dismissed or unheard, remember that you have the right to switch doctors. You deserve to be treated with respect and compassion.
Yes.
And your concerns deserve to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. Your health and well-being are paramount. You should never hesitate to seek out a healthcare provider who truly listens to you and supports your needs.
Now, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the idea that gaslighting can be unintentional.
Right.
How do you approach a situation where you suspect someone might be gaslighting you, but you're not sure if it's intentional or not?
That's a really important question, and it requires a lot of nuance and self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because in some cases, people might engage in these gaslighting behaviors without fully realizing the impact of their words or actions.
So their intentions might not be malicious, but the effect is still harmful.
Exactly. And in those cases, open and honest communication can be key.
Okay.
You might try, like gently pointing out the behavior and explaining how it makes you feel.
So, for example, you could say something like, when you say I'm misremembering things, it makes me feel like you don't trust my perception, and that hurts.
That's a great example. It's about expressing your feelings without blaming or accusing the other person.
But what if they become defensive? Or they just deny their behavior?
That's where you might need to set some firmer boundaries. You could say something like, I understand that you see it differently, but I need you to respect my experience.
And if the behavior continues, despite your efforts, it might be necessary to kind of like reevaluate the relationship and consider whether it's truly healthy and supportive for you.
That's right. Ultimately, you have to prioritize your own well-being.
Right.
Even if it means distancing yourself from someone who, even unintentionally, is causing you harm.
Now, I want to shift our focus a bit and talk about the long-term effects of gaslighting. It sounds like this can leave some pretty deep emotional scars.
Absolutely. The sources mention a range of potential consequences.
Okay.
From anxiety and depression to, low self-esteem, difficulty trusting others.
And one source even mentions suicidal thoughts as a possible outcome of severe gaslighting.
That's a really stark reminder of how serious this form of abuse can be.
Yeah.
Gaslighting really chips away at a person's sense of self and their ability to trust their own perceptions, which can be so isolating and debilitating.
So it's not something to be taken lightly. If you're experiencing gaslighting, it's essential to seek support and take steps to protect your mental and emotional well-being.
Absolutely. Recognizing the signs, setting boundaries, and reaching out for help are all crucial steps in breaking free from this harmful dynamic.
Now let's talk about some practical strategies for kind of healing from the effects of gaslighting.
Okay.
The sources offer some great advice on like rebuilding your self-trust and your sense of reality.
Right. One source suggested starting with self-care.
Okay.
And this could involve things like, engaging in activities you enjoy, spending time with supportive people, or practicing mindfulness techniques.
So it's about nurturing your own well-being and reminding yourself of your strengths and values.
Exactly. It's about rebuilding your sense of self, rediscovering the things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
Another source suggested focusing on your own intuition.
That's right. Gaslighting can make you doubt your own instincts.
Right.
So it's really important to reconnect with your inner voice and learn to trust your gut feelings again.
So if something feels off in a relationship,
right?
Pay attention to that feeling and don't dismiss it.
Exactly. Your intuition is often trying to tell you something important, even if you can't immediately articulate it.
Several sources also highlight the importance of journaling as a tool for healing from gaslighting.
Right. Writing down your experiences can help you to process your emotions, gain clarity on what happened, and identify kind of patterns in the gaslighter's behavior.
So it's a way to externalize your thoughts and feelings and start making sense of what you've been through.
Precisely. It can also be helpful to review your journal entries over time.
Okay.
And notice any progress you've made in recognizing gaslighting and asserting your boundaries.
One source even suggests using your journal to write down positive affirmations or reminders of your strengths.
That's a great idea. It's about actively counteracting the negative messages you've internalized from the gaslighter.
Right.
Rebuilding your self-esteem.
Now, aside from self-care and journaling, many sources emphasize the importance of seeking professional help.
Absolutely. A therapist can provide a safe and supportive space to process your experiences, develop coping mechanisms, work through the emotional trauma of gaslighting.
So it's not a sign of weakness to reach out for help.
Not at all. It takes courage and strength to acknowledge the impact of gaslighting and to seek professional guidance. A therapist can provide such valuable tools and strategies to help you heal and move forward.
It's interesting how this whole conversation about gaslighting seems to be circling back to the importance of trusting yourself.
It really is.
You know, like that sense of, hey, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And reclaiming that inner knowing.
That's such a key point because that's exactly what gaslighting does, right? It erodes that very foundation of self-trust.
Right.
But rebuilding that trust, reclaiming your narrative, that's where the true power lies.
And one of the sources actually brought up something that I think kind of speaks directly to that.
Oh, yeah.
This connection between gaslighting in, like, personal relationships and this rise of misinformation and manipulation that we're seeing in the wider world.
That is fascinating, and I think it's a really crucial point to consider. I mean, if we're constantly being bombarded with conflicting narratives, fake news, propaganda, it becomes so much easier to doubt our own perceptions and be swayed by those in positions of power.
It's like gaslighting on a societal scale.
Exactly.
Like you start to question everything.
Yeah, even like your own senses, because you're being told that what you see and hear isn't real.
Exactly. And that's why now more than ever, it is so important to really cultivate those critical thinking skills, to be discerning about the information that we consume, and, you know, to check our sources.
So just like in personal relationships, we need to be aware of the tactics being used to manipulate us.
Exactly.
Whether it's a politician spreading misinformation or a social media influencer, like pushing a product that they don't actually use.
It all comes back to that core principle of trusting yourself. If something feels off, if a narrative just doesn't sit right with you, or if someone's trying to make you doubt your own experiences, it's okay to question it. You know, do your own research, seek out different perspectives.
One of the things that really struck me in the source material was the idea that gaslighting, like, thrives in these environments where truth is already contested. You know, where facts are fluid.
And where people are really easily swayed by emotional appeals.
That is so insightful, and it really highlights the importance of building a strong internal compass, of grounding ourselves in our own values and principles so that we're less susceptible to that external manipulation.
So it's about cultivating that, like, inner resilience. That ability to stand firm in your own truth, even when the world around you feels chaotic and uncertain.
Exactly. And part of that resilience involves surrounding ourselves with people who support us. People who validate our experiences, who challenge us to think critically.
It's about building a community of trust. Where we can share our perspectives openly and honestly. Without fear of being judged or dismissed.
Exactly. And that's why spaces like this are so important, where we can have open and honest conversations about these really difficult topics like gaslighting. It's about breaking the silence, raising awareness, and empowering each other to recognize and challenge manipulation in all of its forms.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into gaslighting, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways. First, trust your gut. If something feels off in a relationship,
Right.
if you're constantly questioning yourself, or if someone is trying to make you doubt your own sanity, pay attention to those red flags.
Those are huge warning signs.
And remember, you are not alone.
Absolutely not.
Gaslighting is a pervasive form of manipulation.
Yeah.
And there are countless people out there who have experienced it. There are resources available, support groups, therapists who can help you navigate this, challenging terrain.
Exactly. You don't have to go through this alone.
And finally, know that healing is possible.
It absolutely is.
Recovering from gaslighting takes time, effort, and a whole lot of self-compassion.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely possible to reclaim your sense of self, rebuild your trust, and create those healthy, fulfilling relationships.
Remember, your voice matters. Speaking your truth, setting boundaries, and advocating for your own well-being, those are acts of courage.
Yes.
Don't let anyone silence you or diminish your experiences.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into gaslighting. We hope this conversation has been insightful, empowering, and maybe even a little bit liberating. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay true to yourselves.